Hello everyone, we're getting together today to sew the Capecod pattern. Capecod is a baby sailor t-shirt revisited with adorable details as we're used to at Ikatee. This pattern is quick and easy to make, perfect for beginners who want to sew for their little one. Our Capecod pattern is a boat neckline top with an opening at the shoulder to allow the head to pass through. The neckline is finished with top-stitched facing. There are two sleeve lengths, short and long. The long sleeves have elbow patches at the back. There's a small chest pocket on the front, and the sleeves and bottom of the top are finished with hems. A sailor t-shirt also means a stripe knit. For sewing, I recommend sewing directly on the serger. The use of this machine is not mandatory, and knit fabrics can be sewn on a sewing machine. In fact, you can find a technical video on the subject on our channel, where I explain all my techniques. Another of our technical videos that might interest you is the one on stripe matching. We share all our tips for getting garments with impeccable pattern and stripe connections. To sew your sailor t-shirt, you'll need knit fabrics such as jersey, waffle jersey, or interlock. The key is to use a stretchy material to guarantee the garment's comfort. For the pocket and elbow patches, on the other hand, you can use a non-stretchable woven fabric such as poplin or chambray. In terms of supplies, we'll need fine woven interfacing for the button placket and elbow patches. We could also use double-sided interfacing for the elbow patches to make them easier to sew. We'll also need a special jersey or stretch needle. To achieve finishes worthy of ready-to-wear garments, I highly recommend a double needle, jersey or stretch, although this is not essential. We'll also need buttons for the shoulder opening. I recommend buttons between 9 and 12 mm in diameter. You can also use snaps with the same diameter. Here we have a Capecod in Cassonade and indigo striped jersey. This is a version with long sleeves. The pocket and elbow patches are made from raw denim chambray to make them stand out and add a little spice to the top. A twilight-colored button on the shoulder close is the opening. A second long-sleeved version in black and white striped viscose jersey. The pocket and elbow patches are in light blue poplin, and a sailor-style button completes the shoulder opening. Here's one of the Capecods we're going to sew together, a very simple version without pockets or elbow patches, since this time we have short sleeves. This classic little top is made in white and navy jersey, and features a twilight button on the shoulder. And finally, the second sailor t-shirt we'll be sewing in this video, in aqua and off-white striped jersey. A long-sleeved version with pocket and elbow patches in rifle paper garden party blue cotton poplin. An aqua button completes the look. Let's start by looking at the different pieces of the pattern. There's a front and a back, two sleeves, long sleeves in this case, and a facing for the neckline. Optionally, we can also cut a pocket, two elbow patches in fabric, and two in interfacing. And finally, two interfacings for the shoulder tab, which are not optional. When cutting, take care to cut the pieces so as to have the opening on the left shoulder, as shown here. The first step is to interlining the button plackets and elbow patches. On the wrong side of the garment, we interface the shoulder of the front and back, as well as the wrong side of the elbow patches. Place our interfacing piece and iron without steam until the glue has melted. Now it's time to overcast the selvages. Knit fabrics don't fray, so overcasting is not essential. It does, however, provide a cleaner finish and flattens the rolled edges. So, we're going to overcast the shoulder button placket, the bottom of the facing, as well as the bottom of the short and long sleeves, and the bottom of the front and back. We can now pre-fold the hems. For the top pocket and the bottom of the short and long sleeves, we'll first fold a 7 mm tuck, and then a 1.5 cm tuck. For the lower body front and back, The first tuck is 1 centimeter and the second is 2 centimeters. I use two techniques to make tucks easier. The first, which you can see here, is simply to use a small ruler like this, which can be ironed on. I place my ruler on the wrong side of the fabric, fold over the edge of my piece, and adjust the position of my ruler so that the tuck is the desired value. The second step I'll show you here is to use a heat erasable pen to draw marks at a distance of twice the tuck value. For example, here the tuck is 1 centimeter, so I draw at 2 centimeters. I can then fold my tuck by matching the edge of the selvage with my little marks. You can see that the final length of my tuck is 1 centimeter. I continue with my second tuck, which is 2 centimeters, so I trace my marks at 4 centimeters, and all that's left is to iron. Let's move on to the elbow patches. Position them on the right side of the long sleeves, right on the marks. Now pin them all the way around. Stitch them in place while the sleeves are still flat, for ease of use. If you've used double-sided interfacing, we'll iron over the elbow patches until the glue has melted. Once pinned, check that they are symmetrical and stitch the edges with a zigzag stitch. Here's how it looks. I stitched everything on the turn, making sure the stitch is very close to the edge of the elbow patch like this. We'll now move on to the pocket. Start by top stitching the top tuck at 1 centimeter. Stitch with a straight stitch for woven fabrics, and with a zigzag or double needle straight stitch for knit fabrics. Using the cardboard template, you can fold 7mm tucks on the other sides of the pocket. Place the template in the center of the pocket, aligning the top, and iron the 7mm seam allowances around the pocket, folding them onto the cardboard. Once we've prepared the sides of the pocket, all we need to do is stitch it. We place it on the front according to the markings. Pin all the way around and stitch with the machine's straight stitch 2mm from the edge. Here it is once sewn. The secret to well-defined corners is to leave your needle planted in the fabric when you're at the corner. Turn the fabric and continue stitching. If you turn the fabric without planting the needle, the result may not be an angle at all. Now it's time to assemble the sides of the garment. Start by aligning the front and back selvages, pinning or dotting and stitching both sides at 7mm. This is how it looks when stitched on the serger. As mentioned above, you can also stitch on a sewing machine, and here's what happens if you do. Stitch with a stretch or zigzag stitch, and I recommend using a zigzag or overcast stitch on the edges of the selvages for a clean finish. For the neckline, start by placing the right shoulder front and back right sides together. Pin and stitch at 7mm using the machine or serger. With right sides together, pin the raw selvage of the facing to the selvage of the neckline. Start pinning by matching the center and shoulder markings. For a clean finish on the right side, we need to fold the button placket over to the right side and under the facing at both ends. This also means we don't have to tuck in the facing ends, as they'll be hidden later. Finally, stitch at 7mm using a serger or machine. Here's how it looks once sewn. Trim off any excess facing and turn the facing and button placket, which is 2 centimeters, right side out. Remember to emphasize the corners. Check that the facing doesn't stick out on the right side and pin all the way around the neckline. This will help us achieve a nice, even top stitch. The shoulder and neckline can now be top stitched in a single operation using the zigzag or stretch stitch on the machine. We start stitching in the shoulder seam allowance and stitch 1.5 centimeters from the edge to 7mm before the neckline. Leave the needle in the fabric, turn our work 90 degrees, and continue stitching, this time at 7 millimeters, all the way along the neckline. At the second shoulder, we stop 1.5 centimeters from the edge, turn the needle 90 degrees, and continue stitching all the way to the end. Now that the neckline is finished, we'll overlap the left front shoulder on the left back shoulder by 2 centimeters, matching the selvages. Pin and hold the shoulders together by stitching in the armhole seam allowances. And that's how the top of the garment looks when finished. Now it's time to assemble the sleeves. Start by folding the sleeves in half, right sides together. Align and pin the undersleeve selvages together. Finally, stitch at 7 millimeters. Here's how it looks stitched on the serger and on the machine. The short and long sleeves are finished with a hem at the bottom, so we fold over the 7 millimeters and 1.5 centimeters hem we'd previously ironed, pin and stitch all around the bottom of the sleeves with the sewing machine at 1.2 centimeters. I'll show you how to stitch the sleeve, which has a small circumference, on the sewing machine. Place the sleeve on its wrong side so that you can stitch on the right side. The risk would be to stretch the fabric when stitching the hem. So our trick is to place the presser foot inside the sleeve and stitch as if rolling the sleeve around the foot. This way, you never stretch the bottom of the sleeve. I remove the pins as I stitch. You can stitch with a double needle, as I do here, or with a zigzag stitch. The advantage of stripes is that I can use them as a guide to stitch my hem regularly. Here you can see that I have one needle stitching in an off-white stripe, and the second in navy. By following this guide, my hem is super regular. And here's how it looks when sewn. Stitch with a double needle straight stitch or zigzag stitch. Finish assembling the sleeves by threading them into the body right sides together. Align armhole selvages by matching mockings and pinned securely. For assembler seams, lay the seam allowances on one side and on the other, to avoid excess thickness. Finally, stitch at 7 millimeters. And that's how the different sleeves look when assembled on the garment. Now on to finishing the lower body. We'll reform the 1 and 2 centimeters tucks at the bottom of the top. Pin the lap and stitch at 1.7 centimeters using a sewing machine. Once again, stitch with a double needle straight stitch or zigzag stitch. The last thing to do is to embroider the buttonholes following the mockings on the front shoulder, and sew the buttons on the back shoulder. If you prefer, you can also attach snaps following the mockings. And that's it, your Capecod sailor t-shirt is now complete. We hope we've helped you, and that you enjoy your project. If you like this video, don't hesitate to like it, and subscribe to our channel. We can't wait to see your creations, so join us on Instagram with the hashtag Ikatee Capecod. See you soon at Ikatee.